exciting new program year, season, yay. Wow, that got a bigger reaction than I expected. So, good to be home again. I forgot at one point about the Condega dinner auction, and about a week ago I was saying to Barb, maybe we should just have a big potluck on this Sunday, just because I miss my peeps. So even in the midst of a hike somewhere in the glories of God creation, I thought of you fondly. Once, maybe twice. So we're back from our summer vacation. I'm going to share just a couple, relatively speaking, images of what I did on my summer vacation. Barbara and I went, you know where that is, right?
Seattle.
Yeah. Iconic Seattle. But it wasn't just for fun.
That's a pretty snazzy wedding venue.
Yes,
It is. Yes, the Admiral House.
Yes.
Overlooking the Seattle skyline. Lovely wedding. Some of you will perhaps remember Katrina came and visited us at Trinity a couple of times in the last year, and on both occasions I embarrassed her by outing her, during that opportunity to welcome people, but I don't make anybody do it unless I do, and I did it for her. She and her parents, they were all members of the church that I served in Illinois for 12 years, and they live in the Seattle area now. So they invited me to do the wedding, which was lovely. I always get the best views of weddings, you see. That's the bridal party off to the right as I'm standing at the front of the venue. So, anyhow, Linda would hate it if she knew I was showing that picture with her eyes closed, but that's okay. It's a good picture of everybody else. And then Barbara and I got back and we hiked. That's a lake that won't be named, actually, because we don't want you to know where it is. Yesterday, Barbara and I, we went there again yesterday, and the thing about this particular lake is we drove past a few of the different parking areas for a few of the different hiking trails that are out there, for a few of the different venues that are up there, and we thought, gosh, I wonder what the parking lot's going to be like where we're going. There were 3 cars there before us. We saw 4 people at the lake the whole time we were there. So I'm not going to tell you where it is. And we went hiking. This is actually a hike to Mathau Lake, which I don't have a picture of, but that's just because I don't. Oh, we always do selfies, by the way. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Those of you who see the Facebook posting see that we always have a selfie of us at the beginning of our hike. This was a hike I did all by myself one day, the day before Barb flew off to Arizona, up to the top of Tumalo Mountain. And then Barb went off to Arizona, and I stayed home, so I took a selfie of just myself. That's Broken Top, and that is, how many of you have had ocean rolls? How many of you haven't?
Oh, you have to.
Joan and I were at a meeting this past Thursday?
Friday, I was there too.
Yeah. And it was a small group, half a dozen of us. Half of the people there have never had an ocean roll. I'm just appalled. Okay, there it is. There's half of an ocean roll up at the top of my hike. 6.4 miles into it, I had an ocean roll.
So good.
I had the other half of my ocean roll. Okay, and then I had to go for another hike by myself. This is Lancelot Lake, up by Mirror Lake. And then Barb came home. Yay! We got to go for another walk. This is just Todd Lake. This is actually just a very.
Say just Todd.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can't
well,
say just.
No. I mean, in terms of, it's a total. It was 2 miles. As opposed to a 10 or a 15-mile hike. This is just a 2-mile loop around Todd Lake. But Barb was just back from Arizona, so she was tired.
Was it still squishy at the back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there were
lots and
frogs
lots
and
of
tadpoles down here.
Go with the kids.
Yeah.
We were
Oh, yeah.
And then we went down to Lava Cave.
Ohio River.
That's a cool
That's a
picture.
great
It's like the Statue of Liberty.
She's just like the statue.
I think it's a halo.
A beacon in the night. Come unto me, all ye that oh, they said that's scripture. Never mind.
Yeah.
And then we went up to. Oh, this is Horse Lake again.
No.
That is. Yes, it is.
I know,
This is-
really.
This is the day I lost my
Go ahead.
phone.
Get to the point, honey. Come on.
Okay.
Point
Get
caller.
restless.
And then we went up to.
That's the mouse.
Yes.
Little
Belknap.
Belknap. Through the lava.
Yeah, look at the lava.
Cute little mouse we saw on the top there.
It
It was very habituated to people. It was looking for food from us.
Was it cold?
It was cold, yes.
It was cold. It was it was like 43 I think when we started. A little misty. And it was like that again when we went this was last Sunday afternoon. We went to Three Finger Jack.
The back way.
Never Three Finger Jack. There it is, right up there.
That happened to you last time.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been up different approaches. I've been there twice, and neither time have been picturesque days in that way. Although it was lovely in its own way.
Did you see the mountain goats? Did you see mountain goats?
No.
A chunk of our family went up a couple of weeks ago, and there were a few dozen mountain goats.
Oh my God.
Three Finger
We
Jack.
have to go there.
We do. We have to go
I
there.
have photos.
Well, we have to go again some sunny day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
We
right.
have to slog through all that fire.
And then one last hike, and it was again another cold day, but the blueberries were out.
Look at that.
They're nice and blue.
Blueberries and the huckleberries. Now I think they're different. Jan tells me these are huckleberries, but I think these are blueberries and these are huckleberries. But maybe they're all just versions of huckleberries, but they're different, but they're all tasty.
Was that on the other side of Mount Jefferson?
No, these are all up in the Cascades right here.
Just right here?
Yeah. Okay. Well, enough of that. Now we're back. Welcome back. This is the calendar that we have outside the office area, which has these cartoons every time. This isn't necessarily a funny one, kinda, except it just is an invitation, I think, to think about how do we say welcome to somebody.
Yeah.
What's that?
The yellow one on the bottom, left. Am I allowed to take communion here or not? Is that what that says?
That's what it
Yes.
says. Okay, yeah, so in case you can't read it, I'm a newcomer, someone please speak to me.
Well, I like the other yellow one.
I'm new here, but please do not ask me to teach Sunday school. That's sometimes referred to as vampire evangelism. Someone comes to church and you figure out how you can bleed them dry right from the get-go. Please don't ask me if I'm new here. I've been attending for decades. It's one of those awkward pieces. How do you do that? So in case you don't remember how to welcome somebody when you're not sure if they've been here as long or longer than you have, the easiest way I know of is just to simply walk up to them and say, "Hi, I'm Jed."
Hey, I'm Jerry.
Now we've started the conversation and avoided all the awkwardness. Now if he says, "Yeah, I know you," I say, "Well, I just don't want to assume because I have a mind like a steel, whatever, But at least once you start it, you keep the onus on yourself instead of putting the other person in that uncomfortable position of saying, "I should know your name." I'm an introvert. Leave me alone. And there's always sensitivity. I have no idea when to stand or kneel. Can someone help me? So, if you're in church, you see somebody who looks like they're uncomfortable, the best help you can offer is help. So, anyhow, what's a narthex? That's this one right here. inside lingo. So, just a moment's pause to remind us to think about the people who are new here. All right, kickoff Sunday, return of the choir. I'm told the numbers are a little bit thin right now. People are still traveling, other sorts of things. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you here.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Return of Children's Chapel. I know that they're ready for it and hoping for kids to come and join us. And going to return of the Sunday Forum. I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the Sunday Forum before we get into the open-endedness of the conversation that we'll have yet here this morning. Today, this is the topic for the day. Welcome back and 15th anniversary of 9/11. We're going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. Just a little bit of looking ahead. Next Sunday, I want to debrief a little bit about summer worship and St. Helens and what else for St. Helens and Trinity and open doors and stuff. So it's, again, a little bit of an open-ended conversation, but you might, as you're able and inclined, give some thought to your reflections on the experience of worshiping over the summer at St. Helens Hall and all the other related things. I'll say it next Sunday. I'll say it now. Are you the only person, Helen, from Altar Guild here?
She's an altar guild.
I know. Actually, you're still filling in for a little
Yes.
while, and you're still our occasional substitute.
Yes.
So you're not entirely divorced from Altar Guild. But I don't see anybody else. Altar Guild carried the heavy lifting this summer. And I want to remember that and help us all remember to thank them for what they did, because we couldn't have done worship at St. Helens without the Altar Guild stepping up and doing more. So we'll talk about that. Next, the 25th, a little bit about ADA, American Disabilities Act, and how that's being implemented and what's being done around that in Bend. And then October 2nd, hard to believe, but it's going to be time to do a preview of our diocesan convention, which is the following week. And then we'll probably have a review of diocesan convention 2 weeks after this. Yes, ma'am.
I think all of us here should invite at least 2 people to come on the 18th to adult ed, so that we have more people here to talk about those issues.
Okay. The challenge has been made. Invite 2 of your friends to come and join us next Sunday. Okay. Other topics I know are on the horizon, and I forgot one, Peggy. I forgot the Enneagram one. I realized that yesterday, but that's on. Peggy knows what that's about. We'll talk about that later. On the horizon, not necessarily scheduled yet. I want to do a little bit of financial update this fall. I'm wondering. That's a can of worms, isn't it?
Ooh,
No,
It is indeed.
church and state.
don't do it.
Well,
Yeah, we got to do it. We got to do it.
we have to do something.
These are not dirty words. What does it mean to be people of faith in the world at large? And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. But, what influence does our faith have? I mean, we may just look at the baptismal covenant. What does that say about the kind of person that we deem appropriate? There we go. I was looking for the word. This is actually something that's just come out, this particular curriculum, and it's really aimed at largely, I think, for middle school age kids. But it does occur to me, I've been thinking about this a little bit, it does occur to me that so much has changed about everything anybody in this room grew up with in terms of sex and sexuality and what we thought was what the Bible told us, kind of thing. And I wonder if it would be helpful at some point just to say, how is it we got to where we are, and how is it, myself included, we feel like this is a good place to be? Because I can't go back to what I learned in grade school, to tell you that. So, anyhow, your thoughts? Does that sound like something that, that wouldn't be an in-depth thing. I wouldn't put anybody on the spot. Would that be worth some time? Inga Fricklin, I don't know how many of you know her. She comes here, and I know she's involved with some people, but not necessarily as widely as others. But Inga Fricklin has an amazing background. She has a passion for talking about ways to fix the criminal justice system we have, especially as it relates to the war on drugs and how devastating that is has been in her estimation. And so this is something she's talked to me off and on about for maybe almost 2 years about doing something, and I do want to open that door for her at some point. So that's what I brought to the table in terms of where the forum is right now. Some of those are scheduled, I pointed out. Most of these are topics that are out there. Clearly, if we're going to do anything about faith and politics, it ought to be before the elections. And since we do early voting here, it maybe should be
Soon.
it should be sooner rather than later. Although I'm not sure where it fits in the calendar before like October 23rd. But anything else? I mentioned the Enneagram. I don't know if you thought any more about it, Peggy. I know we talked about it a couple months ago, I think.
I haven't done anything.
No, of course not. I mean, why would you? But Peggy has asked about doing a regular group for people who are interested in kind of exploring how the Enneagram works into their own spiritual lives. And it seems to me that before we convened a group, it might be helpful just to offer a general oversight into that. Many of you know about it. I'm guessing many, or at least some of you, don't know it at all. So, well, just an overview. That's what we talked about. Well, what else would you like to do during this time?
Well, we're going to be stressing at convention. We're going to be stressing the radical hospitality, and that is going to include conversations about refugees and those people who come into our communities that are different than us, and those are the kinds of things that are going to be emphasized in October at our diocesan convention. So we might want to do something with that sometime this year.
And we can certainly make that part of the review on whatever does actually unfold at convention at the week after. That's again what part of the planning. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm just wondering if there are people lurking around Trinity that might have a vocation to the diaconate or the priesthood. And I think that would be a useful conversation to talk about, to have.
Okay. Anything else? Mary Ann and I have had some conversations, very much in general, but she's interested in doing something else with us. And whenever Mary Ann does something, word gets out, and people show up. So we definitely want to get her on the calendar at some point. She's, by the way, off to Australia this week for a big conference, which will, among other things, include some remembrances of Marcus. So she won't be here today. She's packing today, and I think she flies off tomorrow for a very long jaunt to Australia.
If we get out of topics, I think we have some people in our congregation that have done or do really interesting things. Like when you said Inga, she does a fabulous program on Afghanistan that would be really important for people to see.
Yeah. Yeah, as I mentioned, she's got an amazing background, and her travels are included. She earlier this year, I think, went to base camp of, what's the mountain?
Everest.
Yeah. That was just one of her trips this year. Anything else?
Well, you probably Condega, when they get back.
And before they go, it'd be nice.
Yeah, they would probably like to encourage other people to go.
That is kind of a problem. Once people start thinking about it, it's like, oh, and there's this, and then there's that, and so. I was in Wales. This was the dreary day that was in Wales that day, and that's the cathedral in a place called Bangor, if you know where that is in Wales, and that particular suffering Christ image was the one that seemed appropriate for the day. So those are photographs I took that day because they seemed to be good responses to what I heard from across the way. went to London very soon thereafter. Grosvenor Square, which was near the site of what was then, I think, the U.S. Embassy. I think it's moved since then, but was there, and they had the memorials there. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So, where were you? Your reactions, your thoughts?
We were here, our neighbor called up and said, wake up, put on the TV, your city is. And we had just come back that Sunday night from a week in New York to celebrate our 45th anniversary. And that whole week was glorious, blue skies like it was that morning. And it was devastating. Because, and the thing, that when we left on that Sunday night, we were at Newark Airport, and we were, it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock, facing downtown Manhattan.
You sat on the
this-
runway for half an hour.
Yeah, we were on the runway, and the sun was shining on the World Trade Center. It was kind of rosy, and I never thought it was beautiful. I thought it was like that old hymn, "Oh, what beautiful city." That's how it looked. So that was just that Sunday night. And actually, you know, we lived in New Jersey, but I was born in Manhattan. We were New Yorkers, really. And when I was little, my father worked in the phone company and was a foreman pulling cable. And he pulled telephone cable through Lincoln Tunnel and Subway Tunnel. And he would come home and talk about this huge bathtub they were making downtown for this World Trade Center, and how awesome it was, trying to hold back the river and pulling cable in there. So that was part of growing up. And then our 25th wedding anniversary, we ate at the top of the World Trade Center.
We couldn't see anything because there was a piece of fog that day.
But we were up there. So, and you know, and we visited and saw the views with grandchildren and so on. So, the first time we went back after that, we couldn't go down and look at it. It took later to get the courage up to go down and see it. So, yeah, it was very, and we never knew that we knew anybody who died then, but we knew a lot of people who did, and especially the first time we went back to New Jersey, there were flags everywhere. It wasn't like that here. There were American flags. I mean, a year later, 2 years later, there were flags all around New York City, in the suburbs. Well, yeah, people were really hit, and I have friends who were in churches, and like 20 people in one congregation were dead. You know, young people. Also had another friend who I did see a year later, and she was working down there in a separate building, and you know, got covered with soot and got rescued by someone from one of the private boats on the Hudson and brought back to New Jersey that way. There was so much drama. Yeah. And another, Marie Christine, because I was thinking of a young woman who had worked with me, and I knew her husband worked there. And she wrote an email that day to say, Eric is all right, but he came out of the subway and bodies were falling around, and so he's not well. And he wasn't well for a long time. There's a lot of things. That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
St. Paul's Chapel down there was unscathed, and they used it as the R&R center for all of the folks who were doing the cleanup afterwards. And my dad was the vicar of St. Paul's Chapel way back in the 40s. You know, so it was kind of a
And you
familiar place.
You can still see
Oh,
the,
yeah.
at St. Paul's, you
Yeah.
can still see
We've
the,
been back there a couple of times. It's,
See the what?
it's like miraculous.
You can see the boot marks on the pews of the churches that were off of, for the first responders, where the first responders would go over to rest between their shifts. You can still see the boot marks. They haven't removed them off of the pews downtown. If you go down to the memorial, you can still see them.
It was also the comment that while we remember this terrible day and all the people that passed, there's been over 1,000 responders who have died since then from extenuating health problems. Yes, asthma and everything that, you know, we don't recognize or hasn't been talked about very much.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at Mount Sinai Medical Center, and that is where they got involved. Phil Landrigan was a professor of environmental medicine, and he led that whole study, and that's where most of the responders have been treated for the after effects. So I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
I had to go to work. I woke up in the morning after moving into the house that we live in now all weekend long, and I got up on Monday morning and went to teach school. And I don't remember very much about that day. We absolutely did no lessons at all. We brought in the televisions to every classroom, and we let the kids, I was in middle school, so we let the kids watch the unfolding story, because we didn't want them to miss out on the unfolding story. We didn't want them to have questions that we couldn't answer, and so we let them do that all day long. They watched until they went home. Because it went on all day.
Okay. Was the school in lockdown?
At Pilot Butte.
In lockdown? Did you lock down the school? Did the
We did
administration-
not do lockdown.
Okay,
No.
because my kids were in lockdown. Well, my one kid that was in school was.
Wow.
Yeah, there wasn't, it was after, it was at that time when we didn't see any threat to kids in Bend from any other outside force,
It's
really.
curious, because some schools did and some schools didn't.
Our older son Neil was working in Washington D.C. at the time, and I remember getting up and turning on the Today Show, getting ready for work. And as the story unfolded, and then we heard about a possible attack in Washington D.C., of course I thought about Neil. He was working in the Senate Hart Building, and they were evacuated, and that's all I knew for a while. A lot of the staff went to another staffer's home on Capitol Hill, and one of the kids gave his mother the name of all the people that were with him. And so I got a call from this mother, thank God, that Neil was safe and they were together. But the cell phones were such that it was kind of hit and miss. Could you send a call or receive a call? So I didn't hear from Neil until later that afternoon. I was in a meeting taking minutes, Board of Trustees.
Oh,
And
jeez.
boring.
It's about as tedious as the minutes get.
And while I didn't talk to Neil, our receptionist did, and Neil was safe. And Neil is kind of introverted, and he keeps a lot in his heart. And he said, every day since then, I'm going to tell you I love you whenever we talk on the phone. And that's what he's done. Just glad he was safe.
We have a happy PS. Our youngest grandson was born on September 11th. So he's 12 today. It's a very happy connotation for us.
The woman who was my associate at the church I served in Illinois, I was on sabbatical at the time. I was overseas. I couldn't get back if I wanted to. And so she, relatively newly ordained, was forced to figure out how to do this. She did a wonderful job. The added complication for her is that's her wedding anniversary.
Oh.
And so her wedding anniversary that year, of course, was just totally set aside. And for years thereafter, it was always awkward. Actually, I saw she posted on Facebook this morning something about the fact that it's the 15th anniversary of that, but it's the 34th anniversary of her wedding. And so I did a heart response to that for Cynthia and for John. But that complicates a lot of anniversaries, weddings, birthdays, and the like get hard.
We had dinner recently with a couple who live in Manhattan, and I asked them, what was your experience in 9/11? And they had a lot of stories, but the amazing thing was, all about how kind people were to each other. I mean, rather than walking down New York streets and people would talk to strangers, and a lot of kind actions.
I just saw on the Today Show this morning, there was a political, of course, analyst on, but at the time she'd been working at the White House, and they said that they came in and told everyone, and she was talking about ladies, take your shoes off and run for your life. And that's how they evacuated the White House, that's what she said. And then that night they all got notice that Bush wanted them back in their desks at 7 a.m. the next day. I mean, I hadn't thought about the White House. I thought that was interesting.
This church, all the doors were open all day long and the next day. Nobody worried about anything being stolen. It's just a place where we could come.
I was just thinking about the plane that went down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And those people knew what they were doing. Everyone else was responding, but those people knew what they were doing. Saving the White House.
So I sat for 2.5 hours in the waiting room at a hospital because Helen was having a hysterectomy, which was supposed to have taken an hour and went on and on. I didn't know what was going on with her. And the bizarre thing was, of course, the television was on and we saw the planes over and over and over again. But there was a family there waiting for someone else that was having surgery, and they're having a party. They're on the floor, they got food, they got drinks. Planes are flying into the buildings. And I sat there thinking, these people realize these buildings are going to collapse. And it took forever for this group of people to kind of finally go, oh, look at that. What's going on up there? It was just the most bizarre experience. And bizarre.
Well, it's so surreal to watch that.
And then they were saying, Helen, wake up, our country's under attack. And I said, where's the more pig? I don't want to wake up.
And she was pushing that button for another day and a half.
Yeah, it was a, and then for, when I finally was with it and home, I was absorbing everything that had happened because I, of course, didn't understand. And so poor Bill had to live through it again and again and again. So.
That's, I think, the biggest disconnect for me from what I understand the folks here lived through. I was on sabbatical. I didn't have ready access to TVs and all the other things. I would stay in a B&B or something, and there might be a TV in the common room. There may or may not be a TV in the room in which I was sleeping. I was out doing things every day anyhow. And the coverage, the BBC coverage, was different than anything I've heard about what the coverage was here. You talk about living through it over and over and over again. There was initial reporting on what happened, and And then they went to more thoughtful analysis in typical British fashion. But the images weren't being broadcast over and over and over again for very understandable reasons why it would happen here and why it might not happen elsewhere. Very much in the news, very much aware of it, but not in the ways that seem to me to have sort of inflicted PTSD on the populace here. I mean, Barb's descriptions of what she and the kids were going through for the few days in particular, the day of and the several days thereafter, that's totally unlike my experience. It was just part of my disconnect. I at some visceral level don't get it. I had to just acknowledge that. For better and for worse, I just don't get it. I still get it. that silly little video, that song, it gets me somewhere. I suspect it gets many of you in a deeper place.
In a way, it's kind of interesting because our oldest daughter was living in Buenos Aires at the time, and I think she probably called 12 times during that day because she wanted to know more. She missed not being here, and our 3-year-old grandson would see it too, and he was building towers with blocks and running this airplane into the tower. That's where he was as she was at space.
But I remember we were in an air show once, and a plane instead of making a complete loop, he flew into the ground. And David was about 10, and he turned to us and he said, "Boy, it's a good thing there wasn't anybody in that airplane." Because I don't think that childlike brain goes to that place. And I will say most of the adolescents in my 6th grade classroom wanted to talk about the physics of the buildings. They wanted to, they couldn't go to the human tragedy of it as much as they wanted to talk about why the buildings fell down.
That's what makes sense to me when you think about kids.
Yeah, they couldn't process that piece of it.
I had a partner that was raised in New York, and he was in Manhattan at a continuing ed class. And somebody came in the room and they didn't explain what was going on, and they just took this whole room full of doctors out and took them to a warehouse down by the Hudson somewhere where they were going to bring patients.
Oh,
No patients ever
And no
came.
patience.
And he said the next day he was walking around Manhattan, which he was used to doing. He said it was just the weirdest thing ever because it was totally silent. And Manhattan's never totally silent. He couldn't get out of town.
I mentioned being in London a couple days after. We actually had, it was always a scheduled trip to London. I mean, in my travels, a lot of it wasn't scripted, but a lot of it, several things were. And I was going to be in London that time period anyhow, because I had arranged to connect with some parishioners from the congregation in Illinois, where I was, who were going to be in London at that time. We thought, well, won't it be fun while I'm on sabbatical just to get together? And so we did get together. It would have been fun. Otherwise, it felt really urgently needful in that context to connect with one another that way. And of course, they had their experiences. I had my experiences.
How long did it take you to get home?
Well, I wasn't scheduled to come home until November. And
Okay.
because
So
I
you
couldn't
have-
come home, I mean, I was on sabbatical. I wasn't supposed to come home. I couldn't if I wanted to, and so I never tried. And actually, the person you'll know that I met in the weeks thereafter, just a few days or maybe a week or so thereafter, was Chuck Christopher, because he went off to Ireland. We did a College of Preachers 2-week pilgrimage to Celtic Ireland, and that's where I met Chuck. And it was another place where it was helpful to connect with people. Now, so I'm connected with people mostly from the States who were here during this time, some of whom canceled, some of whom debated whether or not to cancel, but the ones of us who were there, bonded in a different way, I'm sure, because it was post 9/11. And then Barb and the kids came out on Columbus Day. Always thought it was ironic. They left the U.S. on Columbus Day
And you rolled back to the old, yep.
and went back to England, went back to the other side of the Atlantic on Columbus Day, and then we had 6 weeks together, and then came back in November.
Well, and part of that was on Iona, where it was becoming clear that the U.S. response was going to be military. And that was an interesting thing to be mostly with people from the UK and other countries in Europe when things were starting to shift and that incredible sympathy was turning into, oh my God, what are you going to do?
Yeah, so there was some anti-American stuff coming up at that week on Iona. That was the time when the tainted what was the
Anthrax.
the anthrax
yes.
stuff was going on, and that seemed in that audience to get short shrift. Instead, they were much concerned about how violent the U.S. was going to respond militarily to other people. Not an entirely unwarranted concern in my opinion, but that perhaps is another story. There are other questions we could engage. How did we respond these last 15 years? The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the next war in Afghanistan, the current situation. Those are questions. What should we do? But our time here is done. I'll leave you to ponder all of that. Thank you all. Next week, bring 2 friends.